Hello and welcome to the 10th literary house party, the last one. It's been 10 brilliant days of getting some of my favourite and hopefully your favourite authors live on the show to talk about the importance of setting in their books and also have a bit of fun with asking them for their ideal housemates in our cellar game. I am also talking a little bit about my book because I've organised all of this to celebrate the launch of my second psychological thriller, The House Share, which puts our heroine into a very frightening lockdown situation with 7 murder suspects. So whoever you're locked in with at the moment, maybe it's not quite as bad as all of that. So our 10th guest for today is the author of Disorder, Denial, and also the Audible original thriller, which is called Red Desert. Welcome, Paddy Magrane.
Hello, Kate, and thank you very much for having me.
It's lovely to have you here today. So we're going to be talking a bit about the very exciting international settings that you put into your book. But first of all, I would actually like to, because I'm just desperate to get this picture up, of the 3 housemates that you have picked. So we won't know immediately which of these you're going to choose for the kitchen, for the bedroom and for the cellar. But I would like you to just introduce us to your 3 potential housemates here. And forgive that final picture, it's because finding one that is not copyrighted is really hard of that particular person.
Okay, so it's fine. So I'm guessing you're not, in that case, talking about Dolly the puppy, who is a minor Twitter star, but as yet to go global. So the one on the left is Dolly the puppy, who arrived here about 6 weeks ago, and so it's our puppy Dolly, not yet a celebrity megastar. Then Dwayne the Rock Johnson, massive global Hollywood superstar, and Grayson Perry, cross-dressing national treasure and Turner Prize winning artist.
Yeah, unfortunately, he is looking very underdressed in that photograph.
Yes, more
not how you're used to seeing him, but we have to be a little bit careful to respect people's copyright in all of that. So in the show, we're going to find out a little bit about where you would place each of those housemates. But first of all, what are you actually like to live with?
Well, obviously that depends on who you ask in the house, but the only person in the house at the moment, apart from Dolly and Lola, our other dog, is Ella, my oldest daughter. And if you ask her, there's a very clear descending order of tidiness in this house, and at the top, reigning number 1, supremo, is me, and then followed by her, then followed by my wife and youngest daughter, who are pretty messy. But I would say that I was listening to Mark Chastity the other day, and he was saying he can't, he really can't abide mess, and I'm the same actually. I can't abide, piles of papers or crap on the floor or something. But what I am. I'm very much a superficial tidier. So have you seen Uncle Buck, the film Uncle Buck? Okay, yeah. Well, the scene in Uncle Buck, it stars John Cannon. It's just about this big sort of slovenly guy who's called on to babysit his niece and nephew. And there's a point at which he opens a cupboard to get a bag out, and the entire contents of the cupboard kind of falls on his head. And that is basically what life is like. If I was left to tidy, I would just shove everything in the cupboard. So everything looks tidy, but actually deep down, there's probably quite a lot of disarray. So yeah, that's me. Superficial, but tidy.
Well, I think that's better than completely untidy, I think.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I have quite a lot of family members who like enormous great piles of stuff everywhere, and at least putting them in a cupboard is a different thing. It's more visually pleasing, at least.
Yeah, I think that's what it's all.
You are an author and you're a journalist as well, but kind of anyone who's read any of your books and your bio knows that as well as that you're a psychotherapist. So can you analyse yourself for putting things away in cupboards?
Oh my God.
You have the right not to incriminate yourself.
Yeah, I don't even dare analyse that behaviour. I think it's probably yeah, I think I know what it's probably about. I think my mother this is probably getting massively Freudian at a very early stage in the interview, but my mother is a very, very tidy person, and that's probably some message I picked up very early on. But it's definitely a sort of facade of tidiness. I'm pretty sure she won't be listening to this interview, so I could just.
You can
But I think
afford,
that's
to be honest.
where it comes from. But maybe I need to ponder on that a bit more. Yeah, I think that's probably where it comes from. Some kind of learned behaviour, which doesn't really address things at a proper level. I don't know. Whoa, I don't know.
Yeah, no, we are getting, but you know, it's kind of irresistible for kind of two thriller writers who are interested in character to kind of start with ourselves, I think, or maybe not, maybe brush that away as well. A lot of the people that we've been chatting to during these house parties have been keen cooks. Where are you in that? On that
I'm a really basic cook, actually, and more of that later in a way with my house share thing. My youngest, Tara, is a really great cook, and she's a great sort of cake baker, and sort of she can do souffles. I mean, really sort of complex stuff like that. And she gets that from my wife, who's also a really great cook. Ella's a pretty good cook. I'm just shit. I tell you, I'm sort of like your pasta pesto guy. I mean, basically, if I was living on my own, I would quickly descend into a sort of red wine, pasta pesto, 24/7 diet, and I'd be in a real state within about a week.
That's a kind of version of the Mediterranean diet.
It is. Although it involves buying a jar of pesto from Tesco and some pasta. So there are aspects of the Mediterranean diet there, but yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, very. Just have zero motivation to assemble things on a chopping board and then lovingly tease them together in a cooking pan. Just can't be bothered.
To see them disappear in no time at all.
Yeah, I just want fuel, really. And I'd really happily eat pasta pesto for the rest of my life. So, you know.
Fair enough. So actually that does lead us into talking about who you would pick. So we always find out for the first one who you would actually pick for the kitchen. So which of these three characters would you have join you there?
Okay, I want the Rock in my kitchen, and the reason I want the Rock in my kitchen is not that I'm not a die-hard Rock fan. I probably have watched probably about 5 or 6 of his films. To be fair to the Rock, I guess you will not be listening today, but they're not always the greatest films. But however crap they are, they're never the poorer for having the Rock in them. I mean, he's just a really great anchoring presence in any film. And he's also a really lovely presence, you know, elsewhere. So when you see him on his Instagram feed, or when you see him kind of goofing around on YouTube or chatting to his little daughter, he's always this lovely, kind, solid presence. And one of the things he does on his Instagram feed is he talks about his food all the time. And I get the impression he does cook. And he's obviously, you know, trying to maintain this ridiculous physique, which is, you know, diametrically opposed to kind of what you see here. And he did a film called Hercules, which I haven't seen, but he was apparently in training for that, eating over 4,000, I've got it written down, 4,131 calories a day. So I sort of figure that if he can kind of sort of trim it down a bit, you know, for me and the other housemates, you know, we've got a great cook in the kitchen, and also this kind of really jolly, goofy, positive life force to live with. And yeah, that's it. I've got more to say about him when I bring the other two in, but yeah, that's why I want the Rock in my kitchen. And I just should add, just really quickly, that the house I'm in is a lockdown house, so everyone has a role to play.
Okay, well, that's exactly what we would expect at this moment in history, really. Brilliant. So I did want to talk a bit about your writing and why you decided to write about characters who are practicing the profession that you practice, but it's quite unexpected, really, because a lot of the writers I've been speaking to are psychological thriller writers, and a lot of them in this domestic noir category, so very much set in the familiar and the everyday. And kind of initially you know that must have been a temptation for you, and yet yours combined that psychological insight with these massive location canvases. So I just wondered kind of why that came about, why you made that choice.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that you know, in my profession, or that aspect of my profession, all the kind of action happens in a 50-minute clinical hour, and there can be amazing shifts for people. There can be seismic shifts for people. There can be little incremental shifts for people that add up to a seismic shift. but essentially it happens within the confines of one room. And I think that the part of me feels that that's possibly too close to home to write about, and that writing, shifting the action to sort of a more global scale gives me that nice sort of sense of balance. I also think that, well, two things, one of which I was brought up, and my dad was in the army, so I was brought up on army bases and we were constantly moving, and movement and transition is something that is quite comforting to me. And thirdly, I think I was brought up on a diet of Alistair MacLean books, and I don't think they'd stand up too well these days. I think the women in them are portrayed as appalling sort of one-dimensional characters, and there's lots of sort of macho arseholery in them. But I think he is, that sense of and James Bond too. That I was a kid, I was brought up on James Bond, Roger Moore going to these ridiculous locations, and I think that has played a part in my desire to kind of take things to those kind of exotic locations. And also I've travelled loads I was born in the Middle East. I've travelled back there a lot. Find that kind of part of the world really fascinating. So to introduce as many locations as possible is kind of, it just feels like a kind of a desire for me. And I don't think I'm not a writer like you or Callie or Mark Edwards. I just don't think I'm good enough to write about that more kind of intense action that takes place within the confines of a house. I don't know.
I don't think it's a quality thing. I think it's just we've all got, fortunately, different points of view and different things that we enjoy ourselves. And as you say, those books that you were brought up with are often a really big influence in what you choose to write, even if they were of their time. And hopefully we evolve that one way or another. I mean, I'd like to talk about your new one, which is an Audible original and called Red Desert. Got the cover up there. That's very macho looking.
It's amazingly macho looking.
And well, tell me a bit about that then.
It's again, it's a psychotherapist. It's set on this kind of oil concession in the middle of the Iraqi desert, and it's inspired by this friend of mine who lives around here who works in, or did work in, mine removal, landmine removal all over the world. And for the last kind of 20 years, he's been going to a camp just like the one in Red Desert to basically deal with this problem, which is just ridiculous. It's basically mines left by the Iraqis and cluster bombs dropped by the Americans and the British forces during both Gulf Wars. And the problem is so huge that he said that it would take all the demining teams in the world an eternity to remove the problem. Right. So when he described this kind of place that he goes to, and he used to go for sort of 30-day stints, and I kind of thought, God, that would just make such a brilliant setting for a thriller, particularly if you could kind of chuck in a killer in a camp. So what we've got is a psychotherapist escaping this kind of devastating event in his past, who sees an ad in his kind of therapy journal and decides to escape as far as possible from his kind of trauma, and ends up in a place that is, of course, ironically, even more traumatic and way more dangerous than anything he's kind of left. There's a killer in the camp, and when the psychotherapist starts to ask questions, he unleashes all kind of manner of trouble. So that's the gist of it.
And although it's not a domestic book in those senses, you're not talking about a lovely country kitchen and kind of delightful gardens and people. It's still a community of people forced to be together. How much did that group dynamics stuff interest you when you were kind of deciding how to put the story together?
It's sort of massively interesting because I think, well, the one kind of thing that I think it shares with a more domestic setting where things go wrong is claustrophobia, which I think also we can completely relate to right now. So there's this, it's a camp in the desert that's surrounded by a sort of 12-meter kind of concrete perimeter wall topped with razor wire. So there's no getting out, and there's also obviously no getting in too. And he described it as a place where, at 6 p.m. when everyone finishes work, everyone gets on the Wi-Fi, so the Wi-Fi signal's really bad, so we can all kind of relate to that, I think. But it's that claustrophobia and the need to get on with, need to get on with with all your kind of camp mates, and there are serious tensions within that. So I think there is a connection. There's definitely a connection between a more domestic setting and this, ridiculously outlandish desert setting.
And yet you are able to come out of that as a writer sometimes to go to other locations. Is that important to relieve your writerly claustrophobia?
You mean generally right now?
Yeah, generally, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, I think, I live in Devon. It's absolutely lovely. And I wouldn't want to, I've lived in cities before, but I'm kind of really comfortable here. I'm really comfortable with the solitude, or at least I was until, we had no choice. But escaping to those places is absolutely fundamentally important to me. Possibly, the most important aspect of writing is to be able to plonk myself somewhere different, and kind of really explore that. Explore it first of all, through reading as much as I can if I haven't been there myself. Using Google Maps, whatever it takes to kind of get to know that place and feel as if I can kind of navigate it reasonably authentically and convincingly.
Definitely. Shall we escape back into your fantasy house share then?
Yeah.
So who have you picked to join you in the bedroom of your fantasy house share?
Okay, well, I listened to Mark Edwards really carefully and skillfully navigating around the potential pitfall of sounding like an absolute perv. So I've gone for Dolly, actually, and I'll tell you why. It was 1 week into the lockdown, and we were all kind of stumbling around the house thinking, how are we going to kind of survive this? And Ella, our oldest, suggested a puppy. And my gut reaction was, oh God, no, because we've already got Lola, who's 10, and I had this kind of memory of what it's like with puppies, the kind of the sleepless nights and the endless kind of pooping and peeing and stuff. Anyway, I was kind of totally overruled, and Dolly arrived, and there has been a lot of kind of sleepless nights, and there has been a lot of scooping crap off the kitchen floor. Sorry to lower the tone.
We've all been there who've had a pet.
Yeah. But we're through it now, and actually, I would say that her contribution to household mental health has been immeasurable. She's been she's improved everyone's mood, and one of the things that I've really sort of struggled with in lockdown is sleep. I mean, I had one of those nights last night where you wake up at 4 and you just can't get back to sleep. There's nothing particularly kind of pressing in my head. It's just it's just the way our brains are reacting to this very weird time. So I was kind of endlessly trying to process these really pathetically small domestic tasks and then quite large sort of global things and placing them all on the same list with, the same level of priority. And I figure that if Dolly was kind of lying on the bed next to me, I'd sleep much better because she kind of smells of hobnobs. That's her with her sister Lola, her adopted sister Lola. She sort of smells of hobnobs. She kind of sort of slightly chuckles in her sleep and kind of chews her mouth like that. And I think she'd just be a very kind of sweet, sort of calm process. The one catch to this is that she still needs to get up at 4 a.m. for a pee and sometimes a crap, but I'm relying on the Rock to take her out in the garden for that.
Yeah, good thinking. Why not?
He's a good lad. You won't mind.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly true. And it is true that they seem to sleep and dream so much more when they're puppies. I've noticed that with the dreams, and you just really wish you could get into their mind just for a fraction of a second to see what is going on there.
Yeah, I suspect it's food.
Is it doing this?
Yeah, little bit of paddling away, little kind of frantic paddling.
It's absolutely no. I can believe that. So, as the person who tidies stuff away, can we ask, are the animals allowed in the bedroom in real life?
Well, Dolly has crept upstairs a few times, but I think you're on the. I don't know. I'm going to sound like a kind of dog Nazi now, but I think you're on the road to ruin if you let your dogs upstairs. Sorry, do you let your dog upstairs?
Yes. Yeah, okay. We do. Yeah.
In our house, okay, let me just rephrase that. In our house, we'd be on the road to ruin if we let the dog upstairs. And I think years ago, it was all about the fact that it was the one place where the cat felt safe. And Bosch, may she rest in peace, is now gone. So it's not so much of an issue now. But I just think they need I think maybe with labs, they just need to know who the boss is. And then you're more likely to, I don't know anything about dog psychology. Yeah. You're more likely to get recall in the woods when you're going for a walk. It might serve me better in the long run. I don't know. I hope.
We have
So
a
no,
terrier. We have a terrier, and she already knows that she's the boss. I think she's already kind of a lot sharper, and not to mention significantly smaller than these two.
yeah, there is that aspect too. You know, when they get big, they'll be quite a presence upstairs.
A big presence, definitely. Now we have actually got a question here from Russell, which I like. So he is asking, after 100 years of psychological thriller books and movies, we could kind of argue it goes back a long way before that. I mean, Hamlet, Macbeth, I don't know. How do you say original? Is it sometimes same song, different dance? So what do you reckon, Paddy?
I think there's I think we're all, I think possibly there is a sense that everyone structures their stories in a sort of global way, in the sense that there are kind of hooks, inciting incidents, midpoints, and you know, that race to the conclusion and stuff. But we're all doing things in a very, very different way. I'm definitely not a groundbreaker, but what I have tried to do with the first two books and with Red Desert is to place inside a traditional sort of an action thriller, really, or I suppose the first two aren't really action thrillers, but Red Desert is definitely an action thriller because there's loads of guns and macho stuff. And I've instead of putting in a kind of Jack Reacher character, so I mean, if you looked at the cover, you'd think, okay, that is a really kind of bulky bloke who's kind of really handy with an AK-47 and all that jazz. He's actually the villain, the guy on the cover. The hero is much more of a thinker, and I think I was consciously trying to write an action thriller, but to have the protagonist as someone who kind of solves problems with his brain rather than his fists and his kind of physical skill set. So that would be my answer to Russell's question, I think.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? And I guess, I mean, your day-to-day work when you're not writing is also to do with people understanding their stories and retelling their own stories. It really is at the heart of everything. So when Russell says 100 years, really, we're talking about pretty much since we started communicating with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that thing you said is so very true of therapy. I think I've got this kind of theory that basically people arrive you know, on their first day of therapy, and they will tell what is essentially a kind of first draft, and they may not even manage that first draft because it may be that they're struggling to get any words out, and that's fine, and that may be for any number of reasons, but eventually they will tell a first draft, and my job as a therapist is to help them kind of edit and add nuance and understanding so that it becomes a fuller final draft in a way, because I think the first draft, a kind of client's first draft, will be full of their myths and some unhelpful thinking, and their final draft will hopefully be kinder to them, if that makes sense, kinder and more full. I haven't really fully formed that thought, but does that make sense?
It's really interesting.
Okay.
I'd love to read some more about that. You could be your whole drama theory book or your storytelling theory book. Are you a fan of those books? I love a bit of that, but how do you feel about those how to write books?
How to write books? Well, I certainly will never tire of needing them. But the one I've read, and it is, I'm just going to quickly look at the bookshelf to remember what it's called. Stephen King on writing.
Yeah,
it's there still. That was really helpful. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I'm changing the way I write now on the advice of a crime writer called Ed James, who I know you know.
Yeah,
I've stopped just diving in, and I'm now outlining, and that's really helpful. That has changed. Well, I think the last book I wrote, I just came to a grinding halt of 30,000 words, and I literally had nothing else to say, and no amount of kind of coaxing or long walks or watching TV programs would help. So that's the one big bit of learning recently, outline, for me anyway.
Yeah, I think especially for thriller and crime writers, it's really hard if you dive in. Some people do it, but I think that most of us in that area certainly at least have a bit of a clue what's going on, or maybe who done it or why.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could kind of come up with all sorts of metaphors and stuff, but we could chat all day, and we've got writing that we should be doing about cellars and what we put in the cellar. But who have you picked to put in the cellar? Well, we can work it out really by a process of elimination, but why are you putting Grayson in there?
So Grayson's not there for punishment. Grayson's there for the whole house's delight, because I absolutely love Grayson Perry, and I love Grayson Perry for a number of reasons. One is that I love his and basically he calls himself a what's he call himself? Oh, a self-confessed sissy, which I just think is fantastic. And he just, I mean, one of the things about therapy that is really important to encourage clients to do is to kind of accept and, if possible, celebrate all aspects of themselves. Because obviously people come in, self-loathing on some level, often anyway. And Grayson seems to have reached the point where he kind of absolutely celebrates every single aspect of himself. So he's got this kind of alter ego, Claire. He's just fantastic. He's just kind of this spectacularly dressed transvestite who even kind of turned up at Buckingham Palace to receive a CBE, dressed as Claire. I think that's just absolutely brilliant. One in the eye there. And I also love his, I don't know whether you've been watching, but he's doing Grayson's Art Club on Channel 4.
It's one of those I'm meaning to look at. Yeah. Is it good?
Yeah, it's within lockdown. So he's in his studio with Philippa Perry, his psychotherapist wife, and Kevin, the cat, and Alan Measles, his teddy bear, which is as old as he is. So it's kind of like someone that's 62 years old, and it's in a real state. And he basically encourages members of the public each week to kind of tackle a subject. So it was portraiture and animals, and I think the last one I watched was fantasy. And he's just brilliantly kind of jolly and inclusive and encouraging. And he's got this great sort of Sid James laugh. And then he also gets celebrities to kind of dial in. So they've had Noel Fielding and Jessica Hines and Keith Lemon, all contributing with their kind of art. And it's just a kind of wonderfully joyous, encouraging program. But it's also about making sense of the lockdown, making sense of all this kind of psychological turmoil and emotional turmoil we're dealing with through the medium of art. So, sorry, long-winded answer. I will get, Grayson's going to set up an art studio in the cellar, and me and The Rock and maybe Dolly might have a crack too. We're going to be painting and sculpting and making some pottery and firing up in Grayson's kiln. So it's going to be kind of therapy. And I went to art school and I gave up years ago, and I sort of, a part of me longs to kind of get back to it. So Grayson's Cellar Art Club is going to give me that opportunity.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I would love that. Have you been doing anything creative other than writing while you've been in lockdown?
No, not really. And actually, I've stopped writing in the past couple of weeks because I did this outline, which was really great for the first few weeks of lockdown. The outline wasn't great, but the process of outlining was great. And it's gone back to my agent, and it's just come back recently, and there are some changes to be made. And the time when I'm not outlining, I can definitely see a deterioration in the old lockdown psyche. It's just so important to kind of, I mean, people talk about losing yourself in creative process. I mean, often, I don't know about you, but often you don't lose yourself. Often you're just kind of getting really frustrated and tying yourself up in knots. But when it works, and it did work for a bit, there was nothing better. But beyond that, no creative outlet. And I part of me is really itching to get back to art, but I just sort of don't quite know how I'm going to manage it on top of everything else. But I'd love to get back to art.
It's hard. Yeah, you really do need Grayson there in the cellar.
Yeah, we need Grayson badly.
Yeah. Are you tempted? Final thought here, really. We were talking about all of the processing of what's going on. Are you tempted, do you think, to include any lockdown elements or pandemic elements in some of your future books? Because it strikes me that more than a lot of the people I've spoken to this week, that could work its way into one of your books.
Yeah, I think I kind of got into a brief conversation yesterday on Facebook about someone who'd got a kind of book deal, a lockdown thriller. And for me, personally, I couldn't think of anything I'd want to read less right now. But there are definitely aspects of the lockdown, and I think they have to be peripheral aspects in a way, or kind of indirect aspects rather than direct aspects that I really like. So there's a Netflix show called Unorthodox.
Yes.
Yeah. So that really,
on my list.
okay, that really resonates with me because it's, and I'm not giving anything away here, but it's about a woman who escapes her Orthodox Jewish marriage and her Orthodox Jewish community and flees. And I think there's something about the claustrophobia there and the sense of entrapment and then subsequent freedom that we can all relate to. And the book I'm writing, the book I'm outlining at the moment, is about a natural event that happened in the UK in the 50s, which entrapped people who already had kind of things going on in their lives that were kind of claustrophobic, and the sense of freedom that then occurs when they're released from that situation. So I think I can deal with it in an indirect way, but there's literally no way I could go too near it at the moment. Maybe in time, but I can't.
Yeah, it feels like we do need to do a lot of processing about what it means, and if you're writing about it directly, it's going to feel out of date very quickly as well.
Yeah, I think there's that danger, isn't there?
By the time books come out. Well, thank you so much. It's been really interesting. We've kind of, I feel like, as with all the writers that I've had on, that we could have delved into all sorts of other interesting areas. I'm going to put Red Desert up there as a picture because that's available now on Audible Original, and I love the way audiobooks can really help you escape, and that one's great. And I have to put a puppy picture back up again just because, you know, why not? It's just I have had a bit of puppy craving as well, I have to say. They're kind of the desire for kind of a new furry creature that smells of biscuits, as you say, that lovely puppy smell is pretty strong. You've been doing well on that one. I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I've been tweeting a lot about her. I reckon I've sold a couple of books thanks to Dolly.
Yeah. Oh well, there we go. Do you think she's tax deductible?
God, there's just a brilliant.
As a marketing device, as a marketing toy, it could work. Yeah. I'm writing another kind of one of my women's fiction books at the moment, and it does feature our dog in a very, very major way.
Okay, so your dog food tax deductible then?
Yeah, it could be, or kind of our dog is actually a dog therapy dog, and that's her role.
Wow.
My partner takes her into the hospital, not at the moment, sadly, because it's not really appropriate. But and so that's definitely coming out in the next.
Yeah, book. Just really quickly, Lola, the other one, is also a therapy dog in the sense that I take Lola into the counselling room with me, and clients tend to find her really comforting until one day when she farted, and it was just the worst moment in the history of counselling.
Well, I don't know. I suppose that it was depending on the timing. Was it good timing or bad timing?
Yeah, it was good time. I think it kind of broke a mood actually, which was no bad thing. But it was face meltingly awful.
Yeah, to be silent but deadly. Maybe not even silent.
No, sorry. Actually, no, it was silent. It was silent and anthrax deadly.
Yeah. Oh, well, on that fabulous note, thanks, Paddy. That's been fantastic. And in fact, I want to thank all of the authors that have been part of the last 10 days. It has been a bit of an epic, bit of a hard going in some ways, because making sure that I've got all the right questions to ask, but it's been such fun, and I could have chatted to them for ages. I know I've had some regular viewers as well, especially Russell, who has said, sad, knowing this is the last episode. My morning coffee time. Oh, thank you, Russell. Actually, it won't be the last episode. I am planning to do more interviews just because I've enjoyed them so much, and I know I've had some good feedback on them so far. Haven't exactly worked out how I'm going to work them out. Obviously, the most recent ones have been around the house share. There we go. Compulsory plug there, around the idea of us being locked down. Hopefully we won't be locked down forever as well. So that's partly why I'm going to evolve this a little bit. It would be lovely if you could keep in touch wherever you are watching this, whether it's on Facebook or whether it is on YouTube. You can watch all of the interviews over on my YouTube channel. I've been uploading them merrily. Just search for YouTube Kate Writes Books. You can also find some diet advice there as well, quite randomly, if you are looking for that. And you can either subscribe to that, or you can just follow my page, Kate Harrison Books, on Facebook. I'm planning to do something quite quickly, but it won't be every day because I do have some writing to get done. But hopefully it'll be the same kind of insight into the authors that you're interested in and the books that you love to read. So thank you so much. Oh, Amanda's just saying here, she's just missed Paddy's interview. Well, that's what I was saying. You can catch up on YouTube, and it's got some really fascinating stuff there, as all of them have been. So thank you so much for joining me every 1 o'clock every day. And yeah, keep in touch. I will be updating with what I plan next very soon. But thanks for joining the house parties, and have a great weekend.